to episode 180 of the Hunting Party podcast. Filling in for Euripides, I'm Arth from the Warcraft Hunters Union.
And I'm Darkbrew from thebrewhall.com and the Brew Hall on Twitter.
And I'm Alessandra from the Hunting Party podcast.
And today is Saturday, August the 3rd, 2013. And if you want to participate in the chat room but don't yet have like a cool chat room name, just create one and start typing and chatting. And ask us some questions. And we'll maybe answer them.
If we can. We have some things to talk about today, but a lot of it's just blue text. So if we have questions, hopefully we'll be able to get to them. Our lovely moderator taking questions, as always, is Alessandra, who will rank your questions by. Here's what I want input on today. Is one of the things we're going to talk about here in a minute is the glyph of the lean pack, which is reducing the radius of aspect of the pack. And we're going to talk about it, but I'll be perfectly honest, I am completely stumped as to what the hell they want to use this for. So we need ideas of what Blizzard is actually thinking by making this. So you can send your questions into Ali in a private message by left-clicking her name, selecting PM, and typing in the new tab, or you can send your question to huntingpartypodcast@gmail.com.
Although we probably won't get it. Honestly, if you send us an email today, hoping us to read it today, it's probably not going to happen.
Yeah, it's going to show up in a week or two. So probably PMing Ali is your best bet.
I think so.
So, all right. One thing I did want to touch on briefly before we get into the news today is if you missed the podcast last week, or if you haven't looked at the WHU in the last week, Frostheim is retiring from blogging. And as such, I'm now sort of the curator of the WHU. So we're undergoing a period of transition there. It should be business as usual for the most part. I've been doing a lot with the WHU for the past 6 or 7 months anyway, so it won't be too different from that. But I am always looking to scout for new talent or people that want to cover certain topics that I might not be able to cover in my regular blogging. So I've already had people come up to me and say, hey, I want to see this, or hey, I might be able to talk about this or write something for you. So if you're really into one aspect of the hunter community and you're interested in being featured, let me know. You can always email me at arthwhu@yahoo.com. And because I don't want it to be just me on the WHU anymore. I'm not going to be able to do as much as Frostheim did for many years, and I think it can be a nice way to continue to highlight various aspects of the hunter community. So, but otherwise it should be business as usual on the WHU. Shouldn't be too much for for your casual reader, Joe Hunter. It's not going to be too big a difference from what it's been for the past year or so.
Yeah, and honestly, I mean, it probably won't really be a big issue until you start getting into the next expansion, and when you get all those types of changes, and then that's where Frost did a real bang-up job. He
with the theory crafting and exactly,
and his guides and things of that nature. And I mean, I still go to there and look up anytime I need to get, because I can never remember the names of the enchants that we use, so I always go straight to his little guide there and look at the names of the enchants whenever I need to, whenever I get a new piece of gear or something like that. So it's just little things like that even that are that are real beneficial.
Yeah, and I've done some theory crafting in my day, but I never got into it as much as Frostheim did. Never took the time at the target dummies and doing out all the math. So little things here or there, like determining what the best shots were or glyphs were, or there were some things for pet tanking that I did back in the day to determine what was min-maxing the best. But it's really been sporadic for me, so it's not something that I'm quite as comfortable doing. So, like I said, business as usual for the most part, and we're going to try to do as much of that as possible moving forward, but be proactive if there's something that you want to see highlighted, or even if there's something that is elsewhere in the hunter community and you say, hey, just put a spotlight on this because it's really cool. All that can help. Okay.
So, yeah, that's all we know about that. And I don't know what's going on with the WoW Hunters Hall, if that's just things just sort of going to fade away at this point, or for actively trying to keep that thing.
There's a couple of things I want to talk to Frost about, because there's some like admin things on the WHU that I'm not quite sure how to do, and then also with the WHH, if he's still going to try to find some people to keep that up, because that's a great resource too. I'd hate to see that go away.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, all right, but some of that will be to be determined, I guess. All right, but let's jump into the hunter news here, starting with this ridiculous glyph of lean pack. So we debuted this absurdity last week, and they've made it even weirder this week because the glyph of lean pack, which is a major glyph, this is a major glyph, now reduces the radius of aspect of the pack by 33 yards, up from 7. All right, so aspect of the pack is 40-yard radius. This is reducing it by 33 yards. Cheetah is 0 yards, effectively.
And it's just yourself, right? So, I mean, Cheetah doesn't affect anybody in your group, whereas aspect of the pack, of course, does.
Exactly. So Cheetah is just yourself. So Blizzard is thinking that, or I don't know what they're thinking, but are there situations where you need a 7-yard radius on this but not a 40-yard radius and not Cheetah? Like, that is a very oddly specific radius.
The only thing I could think of, and I don't even know if this is even applicable, is maybe if you're doing one of those battlegrounds where you're carrying a flag or something, it gives you some utility to kind of give the flag carrier a speed boost as long as nobody's hitting him or you. I don't know. That's the only thing I could possibly think of where there might be a potential benefit.
There's the minor glyph of the Cheetah that instead of getting dazed, we just it breaks the aspect, and you have, I think it's a 4-second cooldown on all of your aspects again.
Right.
But that doesn't work with that doesn't work with
sense.
pack, right? Yeah,
No,
that doesn't work with pack. Yeah, exactly. So your teammates in the battleground, presumably, if you're trying to get more than one of you to be running along, would still be dazed by this. So I think that whatever passive benefit when there's nobody around that you're going to gain, if you're the flag carrier, there's people coming after you. They know where you are, and you're not going to be able to use this for more than weird little bursts because your teammates are going to get dazed and it's going to be a big mess. And everyone's going to get upset at you for being the fail hunter that has aspect of the pack on during a friggin', battleground rush. So I can't quite figure this out. And that it's a major glyph as well just blows my mind because there's so many other interesting choices for us that to take this over anything else. I can't imagine the specific set of circumstances. And we're not talking about a specific encounter, because if it was just for a specific encounter or even a specific tier of content, they wouldn't make it a major glyph. They would find another way to implement that. Hey, click this crystal and you get a bubble where you get to move faster. They have
exactly.
Yeah, they have mechanics like that in different fights. So this is something where they want this as part of the class. There can't be. Battlegrounds might be the only thing, because it can't be arena. It's not PvE because we're picking other things for our major glyphs. So I'm completely stumped. This isn't a big deal, but it's just weird.
It is very odd, and I hardly ever use aspect of the pack for anything. I don't even use it, coming back from a wipe, because I usually forget to turn it off, or somebody is just yelling at me right away that turn off the pack before I even have a chance to finish my food buff or something like that. So I don't even bother to use pack for my raid groups when we're doing wipe recovery here.
Right. Yeah. It's so selective anyway. Like, there's really not much that we use it for regularly, but this just seems so strange. Anything that I would want this for, I would just use Cheetah, I think. Especially because of how upset people will get if you daze them by them getting hit. So, whatever. If Blizzard wants to give it a shot, if they think people will take it, great. Hopefully some other people have some ideas, or maybe they're just tweaking it and something else is going to get added to it that we don't know. But as far as I'm concerned, it's just going to be a worthless glyph.
Yeah, completely. I just can't imagine, like I said, even as a minor glyph, its benefit is minimal at best, and as a major glyph, I just can't see it being overtaking all the others that we have. I mean, there's just...
I do like this in that everything that comes along, we at least have like some justification from Blizzard, or we have theories as to what they're thinking about it. This, I can't even fathom what they're thinking making this. So, I like the mystery of it. I hope Ghostcrawler eventually disambiguates what they're thinking with it.
Yeah, and I'll check the forums too this week to see if anybody's raised the question or asked about it, or if it's just sort of see if we don't get a blue post about this, or you know what, maybe, who knows, maybe I'll even just
I might
try
on Twitter.
try my
tweet.
luck at tweeting Ghostcrawler and say, what's the thinking behind, Glyph of the Lean Pack? I can't imagine using it. In fact, I will do that and see if I happen to luck into a response or something.
Yeah, I think if a few of us do that, we might get a response. I'm gonna try too. So,
There you go,
all right.
chat room. You now have your assignment for the week.
Exactly. There's your homework. Yeah, someone just said if it was 7 yards without days, that would be potentially useful, and I agree. But right now, it's not.
Exactly. There's no the days effect is still there, so they haven't eliminated that, and so
Exactly.
I don't know.
Like I said, maybe they're still tweaking it. Who knows? But yeah, it seems like it has a long way to go before it's even close to worth using. So let's move on though. It was sort of a curiosity, but we've got other stuff we can talk about. Dash for ferocity and cunning pets is no longer lists of focus costs.
Yeah, that applies to dive as well. Any of those abilities that your pets have that they get that little speed burst, they remove the focus cost from all those. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is nice. I don't know if that has a real DPS implication, but obviously your pet will have more focus to do its attacks once it gets to where.
Yeah, I never minded the focus cost because it's getting you to the target more quickly. So it was only casting really when your pet was having to move. I suppose there were instances where maybe they were just moving a yard or two and it was auto casting for them that you didn't want that to happen. But overall, it wasn't that big a deal, especially with single target. So nice little quality of life thing, but nothing too big or nothing that we're going to really see on the meters. And Glaive Toss also no longer initiates auto attack, and I assume that's with. Now this is listed under the tenacity pet thing here. Is that for our pets?
No, that's just the Glaive Toss ability. That's
okay.
A formatting issue of our notes here.
Yeah, the auto attack. So our auto attacks.
Yes.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
So I'm not 100% sure why that's important or what matters about that. I mean.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone was really leading with Glaive Toss.
Exactly. That's what I was trying to think. It's like, I don't really. It's not really the first thing I hit when I go. So I don't know why that wouldn't an issue.
I've seen a dozen different openers that people use, and none of them are leading with Glaive Toss. So yeah, it's whatever. And let's see.
Yeah, this came in from one of our listeners. This next one, I think it was Ligerwolf, and he's in the chat room, so he can verify this because he's listening. But I think he's the one that reported it on the Petopia forums that the spirit porcupines, their health only needs to be reduced down to 30% to tame instead of 20%. So that's makes it a little bit easier. I have yet to try and grab any of those yet.
Yeah, but again, there was probably some dead porcupines that people were trying to tame. So this is probably good news for you pet collectors.
Yeah, and it makes sense, and I'm not sure it was, and it may not even be necessarily to make it so it's slightly easier for us, a little less work. But as our gear gets better, as the damage we do becomes better, it's sometimes hard. That 20% is, all of a sudden you're like one shot away from a big crit or something, and boom, it's dead, and you didn't really mean to do that.
Right, exactly. So small stuff coming in. So there's been a lot of changes collectively, but in this past week, only a few things here and there. I think we still have yet to see the fine-tuning that Ghostcrawler has talked about in a couple of his tweets, saying that they're not yet fine-tuning 5.4. So in terms of damage of particular abilities, I don't think we'll see any major changes at this point. I think this is pretty indicative of what we'll see some of the smaller stuff. However, I'm sure we will see some tweaks to the amount of damage that some of our abilities are doing to bump our DPS one way or another, as will many other classes to try to balance everything. So I think that's really the big thing coming up in the 5.4 notes still that we haven't seen, but for the most part, I think we're done with the. I'd be surprised if we see any large changes down the pipeline.
Yeah, I agree, and I mean it's been out there for a while now, so I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see them getting closer and closer to release, maybe by the end of the month. So I mean, maybe it's probably got another 4 weeks or so of testing. I would gather.
Yeah, that
But,
sounds about right. So yeah, hopefully we see that, because the general thought is that either a few different classes need some nerfs or hunters need a few buffs still, especially to account for the things that have been happening to us in the PTR so far. So, you know, we're waiting on those, and I have faith that they will come. So there's some general notes and RPPM notes that affect everyone, not just hunters, that we want to talk about. But we might be able to jump down here to the tweet section, because there's a very long blue post concerning hunter utility that I think is sort of an interesting discussion.
Yeah.
And some interesting perspective from Blizzard. So,
yeah, and like I said, it relates to hunters, but yeah, it also gets into not just what they had in mind for hunters, but what their idea of utility was in general, and their sort of philosophy on that.
So yeah, the blue post is about, it says utility in hunters. This isn't solely specific to hunters, but since it's an issue you guys bring up a lot, I want to talk briefly about utility. From a top-down perspective, our design philosophy regarding utility goes something like this. Everyone brings some sort of benefit to the group, but no one gets an invite based solely on that benefit. We feel that the current class mechanics satisfy the first part of that. We're mostly there with the second half, with some exceptions. That exception that they mention here in the next paragraph is warlocks, whose demonic gateways, particularly in PvE, make them give them a very large benefit compared to other classes. So
we use those all the time. Like we have a warlock. If we have a second warlock, they're both finding ways to do it. And if you haven't experienced it, you know, it basically allows you to teleport great distances, number one, and it also has the added bonus of dropping all of your threat too. So you can use it to move from point A to point B and drop threat as well. So, you know, if you're a tank, we don't want the tanks to pop in there for that reason. But yes, that is definitely a utility benefit that I understand why they pointed that out here.
Yeah, and while you only need one warlock for lock cookies, that's something that they bring that really there isn't an equivalent to from another class as well. So you don't need multiple warlocks for that, but definitely for the demonic gateways. So the reason, and then they go on to say, the reason I bring that up is that it has a tendency to cast a harsher light than is probably fair on other classes. We feel that ignoring the extreme outliers like demonic gateway, hunters bring an acceptable amount of utility. In general, I would agree. Every hunter has True Shot Aura and access to an array of buffs and debuffs through their pets, even if they're not Spec Beastmaster, and that's very true as well. We do have to remember and reiterate that we can potentially bring more buffs than any other class. Not at the same time, but we have a greater variety. And abilities like Misdirection and Ice Trap, which can be valuable on some encounters. If that's not enough utility to guarantee you a raid invite, then good. We'd rather you get your invite by being a solid raider with good performance. So, let's see. All right, yeah, I'm also slightly confused as to the logic behind some arguments, specifically those that along the lines of our DPS is low, so we need more utility to justify our raid slot. If that's the case, wouldn't you prefer we fix your damage output and or tone down the overperformers? I'm not quite sure what complaints they're referring to there. I don't think I've heard those specifically, but
I haven't either, and I certainly would not want to say and I agree with that statement, and that, you know, given a choice between, say, upping our damage or fixing our damage versus giving us some, I don't know, Uber interrupt or something like that, you know, just go ahead and give me the extra damage. I don't know that I need another job in the raid, you know, besides, you know, crushing whatever the target is. I don't know that I need to be on a special interrupt duty or something like that.
Right. So, yeah, Hunter utility is very good. I don't want to see it nerfed ever because it's cool, and our great utility, whether it's buffs or some of our other abilities, is one of the strengths of the class, I feel like. And I don't want to see that go away. But, yeah, we're in a good place with utility. I think the main concern with the last few patches has been just our rotational abilities and the button bloat that we see there. and things like the Stampede changes and stuff, which has had everyone up in arms. So the utility of the Hunter class really hasn't been as controversial, I don't think. So there was actually a good follow-up question to all of this. It says part of the problem here is that nobody agrees on what utility is. Is the developer definition of the word something that you can shed a little light on? Then it goes on to say, my own working definition for a few years now has been anything that is beneficial to the group while in combat that doesn't pertain directly to my personal performance in my role, which basically for a DPS class would mean anything that doesn't cause me and only me to deal additional damage. And the blue post responds, this is probably pretty close to our definition, but it's the sort of thing that I'd be hesitant to try to define precisely because it's something of a fluid term even internally with the developers. So yeah, without saying it exactly, they pretty much agreed with that assessment. So I think our idea of utility is pretty much the same as what Blizzard is using. So buffs and then other useful abilities that don't contribute to our DPS in fights.
Yeah, I would agree like that. Things like, out of combat summoning. No, I mean, those aren't really the big deal. And plus, with raids, I mean, having a warlock is nice, but it's not really a must-have. In that regard, there are plenty of ways for you to summon your members to the raid. Plus, it's not like it used to be where if you wiped, and you were in this giant dungeon, you had to start at the beginning of the dungeon entrance and work your way back to where you just were. Now they've got teleportation devices and things like that, so it's really not that problematic.
Yeah. And then I don't know that this is directly related, but there was one other blue post that I think is kind of cool here that they mention. I think this is in relation to utility. 5.4 is adding Drums of Rage, a consumable form of bloodlust/heroism made by leather workers that, while it's not going to be quite as effective as the Beast Mastery buff, but should make things a little more flexible for 10-mans. So they're making it even easier, and I think this is awesome. I still keep my Drums of Kings around with me because...
Do you?
Yeah. So... more particularly for I think towards the beginning of the expansion, I was tanking 5-mans, and you're never not going to have kings in a 10-man. However, it is possible in 5-man to do this instead, and I'll do a king's drum.
Right.
So I've been using those for years. So I love the idea of drums, even if it's not 100% as effective as the alternative. So yeah, something like this will make it so that people might not say you're bringing Bloodlust for your group, then you might not have to be Beastmaster, whereas you might have to be right now if that's what you're bringing to the group that no one else does in a 10-man.
And again, even being Beastmaster, I don't think it's that big a deal because you're not locked. I mean, obviously to bring that buff, that's the spec you have to be in.
Sure.
But we have dual spec, so it's not like that you can. It's a big deal to switch from BM to say SV or any of the others. So it's not as big of a hardship as it once was years ago when there was no dual spec.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So I think people make a mountain out of a molehill with some of this stuff, and oh my God, Beastmaster has some things that the others don't. Well, the other, even as marksman or survival, we're still bringing a lot more utility than many classes. So, yeah, it isn't. I don't think it's that big a deal. I think it's in a good place overall.
I mean, I guess the real question here, and I think the answer is probably no, but I don't know that people are shunning hunters because they don't bring utility, or I mean, I don't know what the circumstances are where hunters aren't being invited to groups and raids and things like that. And if it is happening, it's got to be happening at sort of like the highest levels of the game where you're fine-tuning things to such a degree where that may or may not matter. But for most people who are in guilds with playing with friends and things like that, chances are they're not being excluded from their raid just because of the particular class they've chosen. It's more going to be because, well, they're not doing very well with that class, or they stand in fires and all those types of things. You're more likely to be excluded based on performance than you are on what toolbox does your class and what toolbox does the hunter class have.
Yep, bring the player, not the class. And while that's been Blizzard's tagline for a long time, and while they've done a better job at some points than others with that, I think the idea that people are getting locked out of raiding because of their class has always been overstated. Oh my God, we're going to get stopped. We're going to stop getting taken on raids. How many people is that actually affecting? What percentage of raiding groups are actually saying, nope, well, you got this nerf to your arcane shot, so we got to take this rogue over here instead? Like, I feel like you'd have to be at such a high, maybe the top 1% or so, and those people are so competitive anyway that they're probably just, they probably have 4 alts that are maxed out on gear, and they just go with whatever's going to be the best for their group, So I feel like a lot of the complaints of, oh my God, we're not going to get taken it on a raid, have really been overblown in the history of the entire game. Now, maybe I've just been in my own little bubble world and haven't seen it affect people like that, but I've never personally seen it a single time in my playing. And I've rated heroics in certain expansions and at certain times, things like that, and it's never been an issue. It's always been bring the player. Who's the best player for this situation, not what classes do we need.
Just to sum up, right? We think hunters have good utility. We bring every buff in the game. We can, it's really our DPS that's the issue, in my opinion, not the utility. And if they can fix the DPS, then we'll be as desirable as any class. Because honestly, we've had periods where hunters have been, people have wanted hunters in raids, and maybe they've been less desirable. And it's all, in my opinion, revolved around DPS output and how much DPS are we putting, not whether or not. Because our utility hasn't changed, other than the pep buffs. That's the biggest change to our utility that I think we've had in the last.
Which was huge, actually.
Yeah, that was a big deal.
So, all right, well, let's jump back into this. Sorry for the delay, guys. Let's talk a little bit about general WoW notes that will affect hunters, and hunters more than others because we're more important. And one of the big things to come out of chats with some mods and admins and Ghostcrawler and stuff is that item squish may be in the works, and I've done a lot of talking, so why don't you go ahead and talk a little bit about what item squish means for those that might not know.
Yeah, and again, this is not something that would happen, obviously, for 5.4. This is the kind of thing they would do in the next expansion, and that's what they're looking at. And prior to Mists of Pandaria, this was sort of a big topic that came up at some point during Cataclysm. But as we go to each expansion, they increase the level cap, and they want to make us more powerful and stronger. They increase the gear, and so the numbers on our gear and the amount of damage and hit points and everything else, it just keeps scaling almost exponentially to the point where it's starting to get out of control. So the amount of agility we have is, going to be in, pretty soon we'll see something like 100,000 agility or something needed, and whatever the numbers we need, the hit cap and all that. It's just getting really, really big. So one option is to sort of abbreviate that and just go with what they sort of consider to be this mega damage, or the other is this item squish, where they kind of knock us back down and knock our numbers back down to what they may have been in Vanilla or Wrath of the Lich King or something like that. So it's a much more readable number, and it's much more manageable. And it sounds like they're leaning towards that direction, that possibly in the next expansion, whatever it is, we're going to have this item squish, and our numbers are going to look a lot like what they used to be. And that's sort of the gist of it.
Right. And there's actually a decent analogy in one of the blue posts concerning this, where it says, we describe automobile speeds in miles or kilometers per hour, not inches or centimeters, because big numbers are more awkward. So that's one of the potential solutions to this, is just sort of retool the language behind what they're doing, which will also make some of the coding and math behind it a little bit easier. I think regardless of what, most of the complaints about potential item squish are dumb and aren't going to matter. So, oh my goodness, now do I need to find 24 other people to run with me if I want to run old things for gear because my item squish is, makes me less powerful? No, thank you, Blizzard. That was one of the replies to this, and they responded, "I have said several times that item squish would not affect the ability to solo old content. That's not the intent." So they're not nerfing us. I realize that there's sort of an intrinsic psychological reward process of, hey, I'm doing more and more damage and I'm going up, always upward, but it's all about balance. And so even if we get our numbers knocked down, so instead of doing 50k DPS, we're suddenly back to Wrath of the Lich King levels. Who cares? As long as we're balanced, that's the biggest thing.
Yep. It will be an adjustment, I think, if they do that, but people will adjust. I don't think it'll take that long to recognize what a good, DPS number is, for example. Even if it's like 10k or 5k, as long as you'll know when it's good. And I mean, you know what? And back in those days when we were doing, 5 and 10k whatever DPS, we felt like we were doing a lot, right? I mean, you know when you're on top of a meter and things like that. It's just going to be the same thing. And I said, like, the biggest concern that people had was the old content and whether or not they'd be able to continue going into those old raids and things by themselves to get all the transmog gear and the cool mounts and things like that. And they've obviously taken that. They're taking that into consideration and said, we'll still be able to go do that.
The answer seems to be yes. That I don't think they've decided if they're going to nerf the old content by a corresponding amount, or if they're going to bump us back up when we go into some of those old instances. Either of those would be an acceptable solution, but the takeaway is you don't have to worry about it. If you can run it now, you're going to be able to run it once item squish goes into place.
And that's one of those interesting things too, because I'm sure when they set out to make the game back in vanilla, that was not something that they had. At least I don't think they really took that into consideration, that as the game grew and so forth and we got powerful, more stronger, that going back and doing this old content by yourselves is something that people would want to go back and do.
Yeah, because there was really no precedent for it in gaming at that time. There had been MMOs, but not to the extent that WoW ended up being.
Yeah, and I mean, and like it or not, I think it has become sort of an unintended feature of the game, but it's something that has become part of the game, and it is actually an activity that people do and they enjoy doing. They like doing it, whether it's to get free cool things or just see an old raid by themselves, and I think so we've reached that point now that Blizzard sort of acknowledges yes, this is a bona fide feature of the game, even if they don't really devote any time to tuning it or making it better. But the fact that they're willing to maintain it as it is an indication of them that yes, that we recognize that this is something that people like to do, and they're no longer have a problem with people doing that.
Right, and BM Jager in the chat room correctly points out that we get nerfed at the beginning of expansions anyway as we level, because of how stats scale with our level, so that he says a fresh 90 is weaker than a fully geared 85, and that can be absolutely true, or no better in some cases, depending on what your gear is or how your stats have scaled. So they sort of knock us back a peg so that they can bring us back up. Whatever they decide is fine. My issue's always just been, are we balanced? Is it too much to deal with our buttons and things like that? So in terms of balancing, that's something that largely, as long as it's not broken, you can forget about it. And this is just another element of that. So hopefully people don't raise too big a stink about whatever Blizzard decides to do, because I'm sure whatever they're doing will be in the best interest of their programmers and the game as it moves forward.
Yeah, exactly. But just something to keep an eye on, like I said. So we may very well see this happen in the next expansion.
Okay.
It's great. It was a very quiet news week, by the way, folks. There wasn't much in the way of Hunter news at all.
Yeah, not a ton of Hunter news, but I mean, this is all interesting too. It's good to keep up on the game in general to see what's going on outside of it, so that we're not so in our Hunter-specific bubble.
And it's good to know what our support classes are up to.
Yeah, exactly. Warlocks are doing too well. Well, nerf those bastards. I don't care how anyone else is doing, but as soon as you start mentioning that one of them's getting taken to raids more than us, that's a problem. do you want to tackle this RPPM stuff here? That's the other big news of some impending changes that
Yeah,
they're
we
making
can
right now.
we can go through some of this. Yeah, they're going to make some changes to the RPPM. I think it's going to happen in 5.4. But the gist of the issue is they designed it so that your trinkets and things would go off right at the beginning of a fight. Right, once you entered combat, yeah, they wanted these things to fire right off the bat, and the problem with that is apparently it just put too much emphasis on the pulls and where you were doing at the pulls, and they thought that was problematic. I mean, they started off by saying, we think the cooldown lineup at the start of PvE encounters has gotten out of hand, and it's having some rather negative effects on gameplay, particularly with the number of RPPM procs most raiders have these days. The pull has just become way too important. It's affecting gearing. It's punishing classes that can't capitalize on it as well as others, and it's not how we'd like raiding to work. And so that's the issue. That's the problem that they see, and so now they're looking to solve that. And I guess we can talk about what it is they're going to do.
Yeah, I don't think we need to go into all the specific examples they give, but in general, they write that to that end, we're going to make another change to how RPPM mechanics work on the pool. Starting a raid encounter will set every RPPM proc's time since last proc to 90 seconds. That means the more frequent procs will still be more or less guaranteed to go off, but the rarer and more powerful procs will just have a high chance. This should hopefully chill things out a little bit without changing how you play too dramatically. So they're altering the math a little bit behind certain RPPM procs so that they're not all going off at once, and you can sort of tier it out over the first minute or so of the fight instead of worrying too much about capitalizing on all of your stacking things.
Yeah,
Am
exactly. So
am I
they're going
stating that correctly?
I think so. So they're going to sort of stagger this out a little bit. I mean, they kind of gave some scenarios with like a 3 trinket scenario, and they say, you know, trinket A has an RPPM that allows it to reach 100% proc chance if it hasn't fired after 60 seconds. It says this trinket will have a guaranteed proc on the pull. Trinket B has an RPPM that allows it to reach 100% proc chance if it hasn't fired 100 seconds. So it will not be guaranteed to proc immediately, but will proc within the first 10 seconds. And then they say Trinket C has an RPPM that allows it to reach a 100% proc chance after 2 minutes. It will not be guaranteed to proc immediately, regardless of how much time you spent out of combat, but will proc within the first 30 seconds. And they ask if that makes sense, and I guess I'll say, yeah, kind of, sort of.
Yeah. So if you have 3 RPPM things going off, very rarely are they all going to proc at the same time on the start of the fight as they might have before, so
Right.
that you're getting all 3 within the first 30 seconds of the fight. That's essentially what that means, although they might not be able to stack up perfectly. So this was creating stacking scenarios at the beginnings of fights where, like they say, like the Blue Post says, it was hurting certain classes that couldn't take advantage of it as much. So it was messing with balance, essentially. So it is going to be probably a slight nerf to initial burst on pools for many classes, especially many players who can take advantage of a lot of RPPM items, but it's not it's applying pretty much across the board, so no one's going to get hurt by it more than anyone else necessarily.
Right. And the thing to understand here is that 90-second timer occurs once you engage in combat. So if you've just wiped, then, you know, once you start combat again is when that timer is going to kind of kick in, I believe. In other words, I don't think you can wait it out, is the idea.
Right.
Was my understanding, is the way they're designing it.
Yeah, and most of the questions they got after that were just clarifying things about how it was going to work. And one person said that it was going to be a nerf to fun, which
right
was kind of weird. You know, oh, I was doing this, this, and this. I was getting 75,000 spell power. It was awesome. So first of all, he's talking about spell power. So obviously he's some broken mage that needs to get nerfed back into oblivion. But the let's see, elemental plus lava burst, storm lash. Oh, that sounds like a shaman, doesn't it?
Yes, sounds like it
Okay.
does sound like it. But either way,
Also in need of nerfs,
a
apparently.
mana user of some kind.
Right. And then the Blue Post replied, I feel like the nerf to fun argument gets overstated quite a bit. We're not nerfing it because it was fun. We're nerfing it because it was breaking the game. So, there's the pimp hand of the Blue Post.
Yeah, and fun is like a subjective thing too. So obviously, in this person's mind, fun is like big numbers. Like this person's probably going to not be happy about the item squish. You can tell already that.
Yep.
Seeing
Yeah.
those wee little numbers is not going to may not do it for this person. But ultimately that's really, I mean, to me that's not how I define fun. Yes, it's fun, but when I think of nerfing fun might be changing the mechanics of encounter, something that's really cool. If I may, I don't know.
Right.
If like the Ulduar encounter Leviathan, like where you got to ride around in those vehicles, that to me is fun. And if they nerfed it such that you had to like do everything on foot, that would be nerfing fun, in my opinion. That's
Right.
how I think.
Yeah, it's not a bad example.
Yeah.
So they also say in response to that, I'm sure a lot of players would find it fun to be able to take down heroic Li Shen with a single spell. That doesn't make it good gameplay.
Yeah, exactly. Even better example. I mean, so again, that's it's all how you define fun. But I think in this case, we have a tendency to define fun around how big of a punch we can throw, and I'm not sure that that's really how we should be defining fun in these games.
Yeah.
Well, if you were doing the heroically Shen one shot, kind of like the spore bat that did 3 billion damage that one time, and if it only happens like hitting the ladder, you're getting struck by lightning like maybe once an expansion or twice, in your entire WoW career. That could be kind of cool because it's just such a rare thing that you would remember that, oh my god, you guys remember that time that I did, you know, and stuff like that because it's so rare. If it was a very rare thing,
Well, I mean,
if it
it's
wasn't
kind of
something
sort of
you could
happening.
rely on every week.
I mean, we
No?
had that guy in Wrath of the Lich King. Remember, he got that special, accidentally got hold of that special shirt that basically allowed him to walk into a dungeon and one-shot bosses. I'm pretty sure they got banned or something, but or had all their loot taken away. But yeah, now that actually does sound kind of. I don't know if I'd want that all the time, but yeah, that might be kind of
Yeah,
fun.
if that was to say old legendary drops, what legendary drops were to regular drops, I think I might enjoy that. So you're like, oh, I know a guy who one shot the Lich King, or whatever the hell. um, but yeah, the balance is fun to me, knowing that I have a chance to, if I'm playing my class really well, knowing that I have a chance to top the meters with a bunch of similarly geared tunes of any class. If I'm doing everything correctly, that's fun to me, and that relates more to balance than it does to any one specific aspect of my damage. Because it just relates back to the whole min-maxing process of getting the most out of your class and knowing that you're doing as much as you can to help out your group. So, all right, I think we're through most of the news there. We skipped a couple small things, but I think they were mostly in relation to other stuff that we've already talked about. We do have one suggestion on Glyph of Lean Pack. Primoc says, maybe it rewards your special friends and shuts the rest out. The fun never ends. Well, that's cute.
Yeah, I mean, that's as good an explanation as any, though. I mean, I don't know with like I said, it's weird. It's a weird thing.
Yeah. Primoc does ask a question as well. 2 weeks ago, someone on the show mentioned that there was no value in firing Stampede under Heroism. I've always saved Stampede to use either under Heroism or maybe under my second potion with Rapid Fire, or failing all that, just under a Trinket proc. Is that pointless? Well, at first he said there is no value in firing Stampede under Heroism, and of course there's value because it's a DPS game regardless of when you're casting it. I think my primary question for this, we would be able to answer this, is that are the Stampede pets gaining haste buffs? Are they inheriting a portion of your haste, or is that limited only to your primary pet? And I don't know the answer to that, and that would answer the question.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure on that. I know initially, the initial version was, one of the versions we had of Stampede, the benefit to doing it under rapid fire, there was absolutely a benefit to do that because they were using their special abilities and attacks, and this was just helping them to regen focus. And there was a benefit to that, so having those haste effects were great because they regen their focus faster and they could get more attacks in, so your Stampede absolutely was doing more damage than what it had been. I don't know if that's the case any longer.
Well, or will be in 5.4 when some
Yeah.
of the when some of the changes come about, because it is, the mechanics around it are changing pretty drastically. So it has been useful. I don't know if it will continue to be more useful to cast it during those. Something to look into, and I can do some testing on this pretty easily. So it's something I'm curious about too. So we'll try
You're not going to hurt yourself by doing it. I mean, my thing with Stampede is the other part of it is I try and look at the length of time. How long is the encounter? And if it's, if firing it right off the bat, regardless of what else is going on, is going to, be the difference between me getting one or two of them in an encounter kind of thing. I kind of look at it that too. I want to maximize the damage of when I use it, but I also want to make sure I'm getting the maximum number of uses from it per an encounter.
Yeah, because if they don't end up, once all the changes and some nerfs come in, if they don't end up inheriting haste, then it's just going to be a whack-a-mole thing that whenever it's off cooldown, you'll want to cast.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's a good question. We'll have to look into it. Maybe jump on the PTR and take a look. So but yeah, fun question, and we'll collectively figure out that answer because it's worth knowing, especially because Stampede, at least in PvE, isn't receiving the nerfs that we initially thought it would. So if you get a substantial buff from casting it under Heroism, under Bloodlust, when you're potted, that sort of thing, then it's something you might want to delay a few seconds here or there in order to cast.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I think we're out of content.
Yeah, I mean, certainly other buffs like your potions and things like that would be obviously going to benefit Stampede. It's really just a question of do the rapid fires now and the haste buffs affect it. Saving it, timing it with your trinket procs and things like that. I think there's absolutely benefit to doing those things.
Well,
Yeah.
the chat room. Go on. Sorry.
No.
Well, the chat room did point out that we never did read their names.
Oh, well, too bad.
Next week, though, yeah, we don't want to, just because Frost is leaving doesn't mean we should stop that. I don't think that was a cool thing.
Yeah, I've done it a few times too. I think the moment is lost. It'll be. No, I feel bad. They're gonna be upset. No, you know what? Too bad. You have been listening.
Well, it is almost that time.
Yeah, it is actually. It's 2:00. So.
Yeah, I know we lost a few minutes in the middle there, but I mean, there's really nothing else going on right now this week. Right now we're tentatively thinking next week will be Frost's last episode, but you're not available, so we might want to.
Yeah.
So we can make that 2 weeks out or something. We'll see what he feels like doing.
Yeah, we're gonna try to have a WHU in-game event around Frost's going away. So we're gonna meet at the Broken Dam.
Loch Modan.
Yeah, Loch Modan. Sorry, I always forget. That's Alliance stuff. I always forget the names. So we're gonna meet there and just sort of hang out and party during the podcast. So if you're on at that time in the WHU guild, there'll be an announcement about it before it goes out. We're thinking next week is going to be the Going Away podcast, but we haven't had that confirmed by Frost, so we're still sort of waiting to hear on that. But we'll give you guys some notice on the WHU before it happens.
It's looking likely. I know we reached out to Michelle Morrow amongst people. I think she was up for that, so it should be fun. Now with that Loch Modan thing, I guess you can do that through the Real ID, right? With the battle tag. I mean, you don't have to be on Icecrown to do that, or if you're in a group. I think that would work.
It's not a raid though, but it's also like pretty low level, and we have the WHU transportation department.
Yeah. Like there might need to be some summonings and stuff, but I think it works. Yeah, I think you're right on that count. So regardless, we'll have a party. We're gonna try to get Michelle Morrow. It'll be a good time. So
Until it's over, and then it'll be sad.
So with that, I think we're at time. So Banya, BM Jager, Chiame, DK, 5K, Getha, Gobao, Gorbrax, Havtor, Ligerwolf, Midzurmux, Oxander, Premox, Slugslinger, Tagurit 1, Warvinny, and a cast of others have been listening to episode 180 of the Hunting Party podcast. This is Arth from the Warcraft Hunters Union.
And I'm Darkbrew for thebrewhall.com and the Brew Hall on Twitter.
And I'm Alexander from the Hunting Party Broken podcast.
Check us out on iTunes, YouTube, Stitcher, or add our RSS feed to your reader. Messing up my lines here. Links are available on the show notes. Also, if you like us, please don't be shy about leaving us a review on iTunes or YouTube, especially one where you mention how much you're going to miss Frost Time.
You can submit a title for this week's show by emailing us at huntingpartypodcast@gmail.com and have your name mangled on air by professionals.
All right, stay thirsty, my friends. Remember to drink your dark brew lager.
No druids allowed.
Nerf Canada! And don't forget to pay your dues.
Yeah. All right. Woo, we made it. And Euripides should be back next week, and I think he's finally done riding around the Canadian countryside on the back of a train. So he just had a family engagement today, I believe. But we should have him back regularly now too. So we're getting there. 180 episodes, and we're just starting to get there.
Yeah. Hey, it's only this is my 12th, so speak for yourselves.
Well, it'd actually be good because we're almost on it's close to the 4-year, not quite to the day, but it'll be close to the day when we did our first episode.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, that's always fun. Time flies, I tell you. It's gone by quick.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Thank you, Ellie. Tweet Greg about because I want to know about this lean pack glyph. I want to figure it out.
Yeah, I do too. I'd love just to get just a thought on whether they thought it would be fun in some way. I don't know.
Yeah, all I could think of was if you have a friend and you're helping him level through, but you've already got a rocket mount and everything else, so I just don't get it. But we'll see. Yeah,
I was trying to think if there would be leveling implications for it, but just use cheetah for the most part. And I guess that it just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, I thought maybe there was a specific thing in the garage fight maybe somewhere, but people are already doing that, and so we would know, but I just don't know. I like my glyphs the way they are. I'm probably not going to change up for Lean Wolf.
I retweeted someone else's tweet about lean pack. Okay, great.
Awesome.
I'm gonna do that. Yeah, I'm gonna go do that once we're done here. So I'm in the middle of was it a German beer and polka dancing festival yesterday, and I'm going back tonight. It was a good time.
It does sound like fun.
Yep. So I tried to get the band to do a polka dancing competition so I could drunkenly enter, but no such luck.
That's too bad. All right. Well, have a good one, guys. I'll see some of you next week.
Yeah, we'll see what we do next week. But
have a good 2 or 3 weeks until I see either of you. But glad we got to finally finish the show.
Yeah. And for those of you who happen to watch this on YouTube, I apologize for the big break in the beginning.
Yeah, sorry guys. But thanks for...
The iTunes sufferers won't have to suffer through that. Which is
right.
Good.
Thanks for sticking it out. So, bye everyone.
All right, see you next week.
I can jump shot, BM, MM, and SB. I can rock out any tree. worried about my threat, 'cause I've got FD and misdirect. Catching loose mobs in my traps. I never miss, 'cause I am hit capped. 'Cause I'm the hunter, not the marked. I'm the fighter, not the spark. I'm the kiter, not the kite. I'll top the meters every fight. Rated and game dealing death. Just me, my gun, and my trusty bed. Now let's begin with Illidan, Osirian, and Gil'jadan, Magdamar, Asgalor, Gruul, Cthulhu, and Razorgore, Onyxia to Ragnaros. Which one